you are taking those type of experiences into account to make sure that we're being more equitable in the way that we're distributing information. And so it's one of the reasons why we measure readability across all of the services and programs and information sites that we support. And as part of that, we created what we call the content design principles. And actually, one of our team members is on another presentation right now, walking through these principles. Happy to share them afterward. But it really gives departments and programs a more practical way to think about the content and the information that they're presenting to the public. Respond to what users need and iterate rapidly. So I continue to that, like you have to create feedback loops to be able to kind of gauge whether people are getting what they need or not. And so our team has developed code and standards and services to be able to capture that feedback and visualize it. And we look at it on a regular basis. We have surveys. We have something that we call per page feedback. And those surveys and that information is then built to create dashboards to track where are people coming from? Are they getting what they need? Are we seeing themes that need to be shared with others? And we apply that feedback to our products. And so this goes back to we're constantly iterating on the experiences based on the feedback that we're capturing. What I'm showing you right now is an example of, at the time, was the blueprint for a safer economy. It was the main tool that kind of told you whether something was open or closed and what county tiers were in and what activities were open and closed with depending on the county and in the color that you were in. And just doing simple things like this and being able to capture that feedback goes a long, long way. And so sharing lessons across teams. From Alpha to COVID, our organization has been trying to apply these principles, and we've shared all of our work and all of our code in other organizations and other teams. In Alpha, we built a prototype for applying for unemployment insurance. Early in the pandemic, that same prototype and approach was actually used to build the unemployment insurance pandemic application. You'll hear from Stu in a second, but the same approach and the Alpha approach was used to build a telework site. And really, again, making sure that we were putting people at the center of developing this information and that site is important. And it's, I think, an approach that we want to scale with when we're thinking about implementing government programs and policies. That approach has, again, touched other digital products. So our team had the privilege to work with other teams, including the My Turn team when we stood up the main vaccine site, the Safer at Work site. We work with the labor agency and their COVID response as well. The vaccine hesitancy website as well. And the schools hub. And so this is the evolution from how we went from Alpha to COVID and beyond. We took what we learned from Alpha, because Alpha was for learning, and adapted to the immediate changing needs through COVID. And now that we're kind of post reopening and trying to figure out what life looks like, still in a pandemic, but almost like toward the end of it. How can we continue to take the lessons learned from what we've experienced and how to adapt to meet the changing needs during the pandemic and adopt those lessons learned at scale? So our team is working very closely with the Department of Technology, Office of Enterprise Technology, to really reimagine and continue to apply these approaches through a unified CA.gov initiative that will build a design system that will enable our teams to continue to build services that put people at the center of the problems that we're trying to solve for. Thank you. I hope that this was helpful, and I'll stop sharing my screen and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Angie. Yeah, do you have a couple of minutes for taking questions from the audience?
Yes.
So we have at least one comment Mindy says, thank you for the information regarding the readability level when sending messages to many. I've always wondered what the best level is, and the GovOps telework site is great.
This is Bobby. I just have one follow-up question to this. I know Angie's done a great job with accessibility, and she's a brilliant programmer and coder, and I've seen her work. It's fantastic. When I went to the digital.gov site, I noticed how simple it was. And that's a real benefit to a person that perhaps have some sort of disabilities and so forth. Are you working with the departments to make all of their website as good as the one you just produced?
Yes. And I think there's so many websites and so many departments. Which is, I think it's part of the reason why our team is focusing on scaling the approaches, right? Like we want to be able to focus on delivering shared experiences that can scale. And as part of that, we will be, again, developing, for example, rethinking search across all sites. How can we do that to make sure that it's consistent? Same thing with forms. Same thing with how we collect feedback across all sites to make sure that we're constantly analyzing the information we're collecting to not react, but be able to respond to the trends and the changing needs. And so our team is scoping and rethinking how we can create those shared experiences across all sites, while also developing and scaling the approaches and better practices around how departments think about content, how they're structured to publish content in the first place. Is there, if not a dedicated researcher on your team, which most departments won't have that, is there at least someone within your organization that is paying attention to these things, that is empowered to make those changes and work with the different program folks, IT and others, to elevate the issues before they become issues, so that they're addressed in time, and that we continue to have a trusting or keep and enhance a trusting relationship with the people of California who are trying to access information and services.
So Angie, we have a couple of comments that have questions that have come up. Kelly asks, is there an automated program that evaluates the reading level of info prior to putting it on a website?
That's a good question. There is not now an automated program that evaluates that. Our team checks for the readability before we put it out. I think that speaks to build it accessible first, right? Like make it simple first, so that you don't have to remediate it later.
And Mindy asked, does the GovOps have a create your own dashboard?
We don't have one. I'm looking at Stu, but that's another what I would consider a shared service or approach that I would love to scale. The way in which we've designed the dashboards for COVID-19 is something that we'd love to kind of replicate, to make sure that they're accessible and work with other organizations that are interested in building dashboards that are accessible and simple. Yeah,
that's great. Yes. And Kelly, I'm actually going to jump off of Kelly's question as well, because she says, do you have resources for how to develop training materials for staff? And I want to jump on that question as well, because this is Susan Turnquist. Angie, I'm a fan. We've talked in the past.
Yes.
And I work in IT as well. And one of the big thoughts that I came up watching your wonderful presentation, first of all, it's the first time I've seen the presentation, which was a surprise considering I really follow your work.
Yeah.
But resources for how to develop training materials for staff kind of goes into the question I was thinking is, how are you sharing this material with other agencies? How is the communication about this getting out? Because my experience in IT is IT has had a lot of lessons learned about web accessibility and about, having to learn not just about usability, but web accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
And so IT has learned a lot of lessons, but we kind of need to pass those lessons on. So we can start with how do you have resources for how to develop training materials, but then also how are we how's your team communicating out those lessons to non-IT and IT areas? 2 questions, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you. We're just starting that process, right? Like that's why we're here. And so to answer your question a little bit better, ODI does have a mandate to develop training and kind of help scale these approaches across government entities. We've been a bit busy with COVID response and supporting all these other initiatives.
Absolutely.
And I think we're just at that point where, and I've been working with our team and documenting again, like what do we want to scale and how do we want to coach others to learn this approach so that they feel empowered to do it in their own settings. So we don't have these materials shared on our site yet, but I anticipated something that I think we want to do.
That's what I'm hearing you say, right?
And there are other communities of practice that have spun up over the years. There's one around data. If you're not familiar with Cal Data,
I am, but I don't know if the rest of the DACs are. We have a couple of IT people, but mostly we're people in other areas here in the DACs.
Yep. And so there's one on web accessibility that is ran by our folks at Department of Rehabilitation. And there's one actually happening right now. Ironically, is the Digital Web Services Network that's ran out of CDT that our team constantly participates in and shares some of these insights. I think hopefully soon you'll be seeing more blogs on our site. You'll be seeing some of this content on our website. And would love to, just figure out how to disseminate this information, because I think it's more than just technology. Like this is the work that really applies to all, right?
It really is, yeah.
And would love to figure out how to continue to work with you all and in solving the hard problems that are on your plate.
Ooh, we have another. Do you have time for another question? Bobby, did you want to wrap this up?
Yes. Let me go ahead and ask that question. It's from Rihanna. And she says, I have found that there is still resistance to producing accessible content for public consumption. Do you have any advice on how to empower staff to actively encourage the creation of accessible content? And this is a problem all the way across in all departments, not just Rihanna's unique setup.
Yeah. I think it starts with 2 things, right? And I love that the fact that you use the word empower. I think one, for you to be able to feel empowered, you need to know that you have the permission to be able to raise these things and that you have an ability to be able to make those changes. And so what I mean by that is, have we given you the best practices and the tools in place to know that you can build it accessible first before it's even out there? And if not, that's then balanced with the second thing. What stories or feedback are we capturing from the public or the people that are being affected by us not doing that homework in the first place? If you don't have an established feedback loop, how can we work with you to capture that feedback so that we're elevating those pain points and then raising them appropriately with the right folks within your organization so that they see that this is why it's a problem and this is why we need to focus on it first. And we know how to do it. So let's work together to make sure that we're being proactive and not reactive, and that we're minimizing the pain that we're putting out there when we're not being intentional and making things accessible first.
Angie, I'm hoping that you will give us a chance by emailing Bobby and Eduardo information about the resources that you've talked about so far, so the group as a whole will have those references, and it sounds like there's more coming out. And Bobby, I'm sorry, I'll go back to you now.
Thank you very much. This was very informative information, although I missed part of your slides because I had no power. Nevertheless, I listened and it was really exciting.
Great. Thank you for having me. And thank you for all the work that you all do for Californians.
Thank you so much.